Somewhere in your head there is a filing cabinet you did not build, and it is full of names. Lucifer, Beelzebub, Mammon, Asmodeus, Belphegor, ranks and titles, dukes and princes, a throne room under the world with a chain of command. Ask almost anyone how it started, and you will get the same story, told with total confidence. The most beautiful angel in heaven, pride, a rebellion, a third of the stars falling, a new name for a ruined creature. Now go and look for that story in the Bible. Take your time, read the whole thing. It is not there, not in that shape, not with those names, not in that order. What is there is stranger, thinner, and far more unsettling than the version we inherited. A wilderness with a goat walking into it. A courtroom with a prosecutor in it. A word that is a job description before it is anybody's name. A creature in a ruined city that nobody can translate. A spirit that volunteers to lie in front of God and is sent. And an enemy who, in the actual text, is almost never explained. He is simply there, and then he is defeated. We're going to walk through every one of them. Every named evil spirit in Scripture, and every one the text only describes. And you are going to find out where the rest of your filing cabinet actually came from. Because it did come from somewhere. Here's the thing I want you to walk away with, and once you see it, you will not be able to unsee it. The Bible has almost no demonology. It has no roster, no hierarchy, no origin story laid out in order. It gives these beings less attention than any book of its era, and less than any tradition built on top of it. The silence is not an accident. It is the point. The Bible is deliberately, aggressively uninterested in them, and that lack of interest is itself a claim. It is saying, this is not the story. Stop asking about them. Everything ornate you know, the ranks, the sigils, the 72 dukes, was added later by people we can name, in centuries we can date. So let us go back to the text with the cabinet emptied out, and start with a single word. The word is Hebrew, Satan. And in the Old Testament it is not a name, it is a common noun. It means adversary, opponent, the one who stands in your way. It is the word you would use in a lawsuit or a war. Ordinary human beings are called it. In 1 Kings, a foreign king is raised up as a Satan against Solomon, a political enemy. The verb behind it means to accuse, to oppose, to obstruct. It is courtroom language and street language before it is ever theology. So when the Old Testament says, "Ha, Satan," with the definite article, the Satan, it is not saying a name, it is saying the accuser, the way you would say the prosecutor, not who he is, what he does. Now hold that, because it changes the first scene most people think they understand. The book of Job opens with a court in session, not a battlefield. A court. Now there was a day when the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord, and the Satan also came among them. He is not breaking in. He is not sneaking. He arrives with everyone else as one of the assembled on a scheduled day. God speaks to him first, asks where he has been, gets a plain answer from going to and fro on the earth. Patrolling, some translations suggest, walking the ground. An inspector's answer. Then God raises Job's name, not the accuser. God does. Have you considered my servant Job? And the accuser does the one thing his title says he does. He files an objection. Does Job fear God for no reason? It is a legal question, and it is a sharp one. Is this man's loyalty real, or is it purchased? And here's the part that unsettles readers who came expecting a rebel. He asks permission, and he receives it. Behold, all that he has is in your hand. Only against him do not stretch out your hand. There is a limit. There is always a limit. He operates inside a boundary he did not set and cannot move. Whatever this figure is in Job, he is not an equal power at war with heaven. He is a subordinate with a portfolio. The same figure stands up in the prophet Zechariah, and again the setting is a courtroom. Joshua the high priest is standing before the angel of the Lord, and the Satan is standing at his right hand to accuse him. The right hand was the prosecutor's position. The text is describing a seating arrangement, and everyone in the ancient world knew what it meant. And the case collapses immediately. The Lord rebuke you. Is not this a brand plucked from the fire? The accusation is not even answered on its merits. It is simply overruled. That is twice now. Now, here is the detail almost nobody knows, and it is the one that settles the argument about the word. In the book of Numbers, Balaam is riding his donkey down a road, and God is angry with him. And the angel of the Lord took his stand in the way as his adversary. That is the English. The Hebrew word behind adversary is Satan. The angel of the Lord is a Satan, to Balaam, on God's orders, which means the word cannot possibly be a proper name at that point. It is a role, and here a loyal angel is playing it. Standing in the road. Blocking. Obstructing a man from a course he should not take. That is the whole job. So where does the name come from? There is one verse in the Hebrew Bible where the article disappears. 1 Chronicles, chapter 21. Then Satan stood against Israel and incited David to number Israel. No article. Not the accuser, just the bare word, standing where a personal name would stand. And here is why that verse is famous. The same event is told in 2 Samuel, and it is told differently. Again, the anger of the Lord was kindled against Israel, and he incited David against them, saying, "Go, number Israel and Judah." Same census, same king, same disaster afterwards. 2 accounts, and the one doing the inciting has changed. In Samuel, it is God. In Chronicles, it is Satan. And Chronicles is the later book, retelling the earlier one. You are watching a shift happen, on the page, in real time, a role becoming a character. Whatever you conclude about why, the fact itself is not disputed. The Hebrew is plain. The article is there, then it is gone. And in the centuries between the testaments, that bare word hardens all the way into a proper name. By the New Testament, Satan is simply who he is. No article needed, no explanation offered. Now for the big one. The fall. The single most confidently repeated story about him, and the one with the thinnest text under it. It rests almost entirely on one verse in Isaiah, chapter 14. And Isaiah tells you, 4 verses earlier, exactly who he is talking about. You will take up this taunt against the king of Babylon. That is the label on the poem. It is right there. A taunt. A victory song sung over a dead tyrant. The genre is not prophecy about heaven. It is mockery of a corpse. And then the famous line, "How you are fallen from heaven, O day star, son of dawn." The Hebrew is Hallel ben Shachar, shining one, son of the dawn, and it is the morning star, Venus. The bright thing that climbs highest in the sky just before sunrise and then is wiped out by the sun, it announced. That is the joke. That is the taunt. You blazed, you climbed, and then daylight came and nobody could find you. The Greek translators rendered it with their own word for the morning star. And then Jerome, translating into Latin, reached for the ordinary Latin word, Lucifer, light-bearer, lux, light, fera, to carry. It was not a name, it was the Latin for Venus. Roman writers used it for the actual planet, in poems about actual mornings, with no devil anywhere in sight. The King James translators, 1,000 years later, carried the Latin word straight into English and capitalized it. And a common noun for a planet became, for millions of English readers, the birth name of the devil. Modern translations mostly quietly undid it. Day star, morning star, shining one. Read one of those, and the verse reads like what it is. A dead king being laughed at. And here is the internal proof. Read a few lines further down. The taunt says his body is thrown out unburied, and that other kings greet him in Sheol. Fallen angels do not have corpses. Now, is Isaiah drawing on older imagery about a divine being who tried to climb and failed? Very possibly. Scholars argue that seriously. But that is a claim about the poem's raw material, not about its subject. Its subject is stated, King of Babylon. The same thing happens in Ezekiel chapter 28. A magnificent being in Eden, an anointed guardian cherub, perfect beauty corrupted by pride. It is gorgeous, and it is haunting, and it is addressed, in the text, explicitly, to the king of Tyre, a merchant king, drunk on trade wealth, whose city sat on an island and thought itself untouchable. Read either passage as a biography of Satan, and you have to ignore the address on the envelope. Twice. So does the Bible say anything about him falling? Yes. 2 places. And they are both much shorter than you expect. Jesus, in Luke, when the 72 come back thrilled that the demons obeyed them. I saw Satan fall like lightning from heaven. 1 sentence. No date, no cause, no court scene, no third of the stars. And notice the context. It is said as a comment on their success. It is about power collapsing now, not a memory of the beginning. The other is Revelation 12. War arose in heaven, Michael and his angels fighting against the dragon. The great dragon thrown down, called the devil and Satan, the deceiver of the whole world, and his angels thrown down with him. That is the fullest account in the Bible. And it sits in the middle of a vision, after a woman and a child. Many readers take it as the cross scene from the other side. Not an event before Genesis, but the outcome of Good Friday. Either way, notice what is missing. No name change, no pride monologue, no description of what he was before. The Bible tells you he lost. It is remarkably uninterested in telling you how he started. But there is one strand about rebel spiritual beings that the Bible genuinely does have. And it is far older and stranger than Lucifer. Genesis, chapter 6, 4 verses, dropped in without warning just before the flood. The sons of God saw that the daughters of man were attractive, and they took as their wives any they chose. And out of that comes the Nephilim, the mighty men who were of old, the men of renown. The text does not explain, it does not moralize, it states it, and then the flood arrives. That phrase, sons of God, shows up elsewhere, and elsewhere it clearly means members of God's heavenly council. It is the same phrase used in Job chapter 1 for the beings who present themselves before the Lord. Psalm 82 opens with God taking his place in the divine council, holding judgment in the midst of the gods. And he indicts them for judging unjustly, for showing partiality to the wicked, for leaving the weak undefended. You are gods, sons of the Most High, all of you. Nevertheless, like men, you shall die. Whatever those beings are, the psalm says they were given responsibility. They abused it, and they lose their immortality for it. And there is a verse in Deuteronomy 32 that most readers have never seen in its oldest form. When the Most High gave the nations their inheritance, he fixed the borders of the peoples according to the number of the sons of God. That reading comes from the Dead Sea Scrolls and the Greek Septuagint. The standard Hebrew text reads sons of Israel instead. It is a real textual difference, printed in the footnotes of ordinary study Bibles. Nothing hidden about it. And on the older reading, the nations were parceled out among heavenly beings, who, a few psalms later, are on trial for how they governed. Then, in the same chapter, verse 17, they sacrificed to demons that were not God, to gods they had never known. The Hebrew word there is Shedem. It appears exactly twice in the entire Hebrew Bible, here and in Psalm 1:6, and they sacrificed their sons and their daughters to the Shedim. That is the second and last occurrence. The word is almost certainly borrowed from Akkadian, where a Shedu was a protective spirit, those winged bull guardians at Assyrian palace gates. Israel takes a neighbor's word for a guardian spirit and uses it for the thing you must never feed your children to. The New Testament picks up that exact move. Paul tells the Corinthians that what pagans sacrifice, they offer to demons and not to God. He is quoting Deuteronomy. The line runs straight through. Now to the strangest name in the Old Testament, and it sits inside the holiest ritual Israel had, the Day of Atonement. Leviticus 16. Aaron takes 2 goats and sets them before the Lord at the entrance of the tent of meeting. And Aaron shall cast lots over the 2 goats, 1 lot for the Lord and the other lot for Azazel. 1 goat is a sin offering. The other is presented alive and sent away into the wilderness to Azazel. Aaron lays both hands on its head and confesses over it all the iniquities of the people of Israel, all their transgressions, all their sins. And the goat carries them out to a remote area and is let go. That is where we get the English word scapegoat. Now, what is Azazel? And the honest answer, printed in the footnotes of ordinary Bibles, is that nobody knows. 3 serious options. It may be a place, a cliff, a rough and cut-off region of the desert. It may be a description of the act itself, read as the goat that goes away. That is the reading behind older translations. Or it may be the name of a demon of the wilderness, which is how the Book of Enoch and a good deal of Jewish tradition took it. The grammar leans that way. The lots are cast for the Lord and for Azazel. If one side of that pairing is a person, symmetry suggests the other is too. But the ritual is not a sacrifice to anything. Nothing is killed, nothing is offered, nothing is given. The goat is released. Whatever Azazel is, sin is being carried out of the camp, past the edge of the inhabited world, and abandoned there. And that is the whole picture the Old Testament gives you of the demonic. The wilderness. The outside. The place order stops, which is worth remembering when you read that Jesus, immediately after his baptism, was driven out into exactly that place to be tested. Now the other Old Testament word, and it is otter, serim, literally hairy ones, goat things. Leviticus 17 forbids Israel to sacrifice to the goat demons, after whom they whore, a statute forever, which tells you plainly that somebody was doing it. You do not legislate against a practice nobody practices. 2 Chronicles says, Jeroboam appointed his own priests for the high places and for the goat idols and the calves he had made. So there was an established, staffed cult of these things inside Israel's own history, and the text mentions it almost in passing. And the same word turns up in Isaiah's ruined cities, or the wild goats, or the goat demons, dance among the wreckage. Translators split on it, because the Hebrew genuinely will not decide, animals or spirits, or a deliberate blur of both. And that blur is the point. A ruin is where the domestic order ends and something else moves in, which brings us to the most misused single word in the Bible. It appears once, in one verse, in one ruined city. Isaiah 34, verse 14. And your Bible probably translates it as an owl. Wild animals shall meet with hyenas. The wild goat shall cry to his fellow. There the night bird settles and finds herself a resting place. The Hebrew word behind night bird is Lilith, and most study Bibles will simply admit, in a footnote, identity uncertain. That is the honest answer. And it is the whole biblical evidence. One word, one verse, no story, no first wife, no Garden of Eden, no refusal to submit, no flight from Adam. None of that is in the Bible. It sounds like the Hebrew word for night, and it very probably is connected to a family of Mesopotamian night demons called Lilith. Those are real, and they are old, and they are documented in Akkadian incantations centuries before Isaiah. So Isaiah is likely reaching for a name his hearers would find sinister, the way you would say something haunts a place. The elaborate Lilith story, Adam's first wife made from the same dust who left him, comes from a much later text, the Alphabet of Ben Sira, a medieval Jewish satirical work roughly 1,000 years after Christ, and quite possibly written as comedy. It is a fascinating document. It is not scripture, and no ancient Jewish or Christian community treated it as such. So when someone tells you the Bible mentions Adam's first wife, they are right that the Bible mentions a word, and everything else attached to that word arrived about 2,000 years later. Next name, Belial. And this one has the opposite problem. The Old Testament uses it constantly and never as a person. Belial, something like worthlessness or without profit. It is an insult, and it is grammatically a noun, not a name. Deuteronomy warns about certain worthless fellows who draw a city into worshiping other gods, literally, sons of Belial. Eli's corrupt sons are called it. The men who assault the Levite's concubine are called it. Nabal's servants say it about their own master. Every single time, it describes human beings behaving destructively. It is the ancient equivalent of calling someone a piece of human garbage. Then, in the Dead Sea Scrolls, Belial becomes a full personal name, the commander of the forces of darkness in the War Scroll. And Paul, writing to Corinth, uses it that way once. What accord has Christ with Belial? The Greek there is Beliar, and it stands opposite Christ, as a person opposite a person. That is the only time in the New Testament. So you can actually watch a Hebrew insult become a Second Temple proper noun, and then arrive in Paul's letter fully personified. Now to a passage that makes people genuinely uncomfortable, and should. 1 Kings, chapter 22. The prophet Micaiah describes a vision, out loud, to two kings who did not want to hear it. I saw the Lord sitting on his throne, and all the host of heaven standing beside him on his right hand and on his left. And the Lord said, Who will entice Ahab, that he may go up and fall at Ramoth-Gilead? And one said one thing, and another said another. A deliberation. A room full of proposals. Then a spirit came forward and stood before the Lord, saying, I will entice him. By what means, God asks, and the spirit answers, I will go out and be a lying spirit in the mouth of all his prophets. And God says, You are to entice him, and you shall succeed. Go out and do so. The spirit is not named, not called a demon, not called Satan. It is simply a spirit, one of the host, that volunteers. And it is authorized. The whole scene sits under God's throne, in God's counsel, with God's permission. Micaiah then tells Ahab exactly what he has just seen, which means Ahab is warned that he is being deceived, and marches out anyway. There is a related passage in 1 Samuel, and it is one of the hardest sentences in the Old Testament. Now the Spirit of the Lord departed from Saul, and a harmful spirit from the Lord tormented him. From the Lord, not from a rival kingdom of evil. The Hebrew Bible does not have a rival kingdom of evil. It has one throne, and everything that happens under the sky happens somewhere within its permission. That is uncomfortable, and the text does not soften it. There is a similar figure in Exodus. The destroyer who passes through Egypt on the night of the Passover. The Lord will not allow the destroyer to enter your houses to strike you. A separate agent, held back by a mark on a door. And in Daniel chapter 10, something new appears. Territory. A messenger tells Daniel he was delayed. The prince of the kingdom of Persia withstood me 21 days, until Michael, one of the chief princes, came to help him. And then I will return to fight against the prince of Persia. And when I go out, behold, the prince of Greece will come. Empires with spiritual counterparts. A conflict that runs parallel to human politics on the same map over the same ground. It is the closest thing to a hierarchy anywhere in the Old Testament, and even here nobody is given a personal name except Michael. Now, before the New Testament, something important happens. Roughly 400 years of Jewish literature happens, and in that literature, the demonology explodes. Names multiply. Origins get explained. Systems appear. The Book of Enoch takes the 4 cryptic verses of Genesis 6 and builds an entire epic on them. 200 watchers descending on a mountain, named leaders. Forbidden knowledge taught to humans, metalwork, weapons, cosmetics, sorcery, giant offspring. And when the giants die, their disembodied spirits remain on the earth. That is where Enoch says demons come from. That is not a biblical explanation. It is an explanation written about a biblical passage centuries later. But it mattered enormously, and it left fingerprints. Jude quotes Enoch by name. 2 Peter says, God cast the sinning angels into Tartarus. Tartarus, a Greek word from Greek mythology for the pit below Hades. It appears once in the whole Bible in that verse. The word watcher itself is biblical, in Aramaic in Daniel 4. A watcher, a holy one, came down from heaven. But in Daniel, that watcher is loyal and delivers a divine decree. The word does not mean rebel. Enoch made it mean rebel. The book of Tobit, from the same period, gives us Asmodeus, who kills Sarah's husbands one after another, and he is defeated by burning the heart and liver of a fish, after which the angel Raphael binds him in Egypt. Tobit is in Catholic and Orthodox Bibles and outside Protestant ones. Either way, it is not the Hebrew Bible, and it is worth knowing which layer you are quoting. So by the time we reach the Gospels, the vocabulary is already loaded, and the Gospels use it, but sparely. The Greek word is daimonion. In classical Greek, it did not mean evil. It meant a lesser divinity, a spirit, sometimes a guiding one. Socrates famously said he had one. In the New Testament, the word narrows to something exclusively hostile. And the other phrase the Gospels use constantly is unclean spirit, pneuma akatharton, ritually impure, belonging outside. And here is what should stop you. In all of the Gospels, exactly one demon is ever asked its name. Once. In the country of the Gerasenes, a man living among the tombs who could not be restrained, Jesus asks him, "What is your name?" And the answer comes back, "My name is Legion, for we are many." And Legion is not a name. It is a Roman army unit. On paper, over 5,000 men. The man is living in the Decapolis, an occupied territory, and the word for what is inside him is the word for the occupying force. Ancient readers would not have missed that. Neither would the man, neither, one suspects, did Mark. And they beg not to be sent out of the country. They ask for the pigs instead. Permission is given. The herd, about 2,000, rushes down the steep bank into the sea and drowns. Notice, even here, the only demon in the Bible who answers a question about identity answers with a plural noun and a military rank. It cannot even give a name. It gives a head count. And the next thing we see is the man clothed and in his right mind, sitting down. That is the point of the scene. Now the one figure the Gospels do name as a ruler. Beelzebul. The Pharisees say of Jesus, "It is only by Beelzebul, the prince of demons, that this man casts out demons." That is an accusation by his opponents, not a doctrine by the narrator. It matters who is speaking. And the strongest Greek manuscripts read Beelzebul with an L, while the Latin tradition, and from it the King James, reads Beelzebub with a B. Beelzebub with a B goes back to 2 Kings, where a sick king sends messengers to inquire of Beelzebub, the god of Ekron. Beelzebub means Lord of the Flies, which is a spectacular thing to call a god you are asking for help. Many scholars think that is exactly the joke, that the real Philistine title was something like Baal the Prince, and Hebrew scribes bent it into flies. That reconstruction is well argued and widely held, but it is a reconstruction. The Hebrew text as we have it just says flies. Either way, the gospel usage is clear enough. A local Philistine god's name, repurposed as an insult for the head of the demons. Jesus does not dispute the title. He disputes the logic. If Satan casts out Satan, he is divided against himself. Now a spirit named after a snake. Acts chapter 16 in Philippi. Paul is met by a slave girl who had a spirit of divination and brought her owners much gain by fortune-telling. The Greek behind spirit of divination is pneuma pythona, a python spirit, and the word appears exactly once in the New Testament. Python was the serpent of Delphi, killed by Apollo, whose priestess then prophesied at that site. So the word had come to mean a ventriloquist, or an oracle, someone speaking with a voice not their own. And what the girl says is true. These men are servants of the Most High God, who proclaim to you the way of salvation. She is not lying. She is advertising. And Paul, after many days of it, is simply annoyed and ends it in one sentence. Then the story turns to something else entirely, her owners, who saw that their hope of gain was gone. A girl who was profitable while possessed and worthless once freed. Luke wants you to sit with that. And one more figure people always ask about. Mary Magdalene, from whom 7 demons had gone out. Luke says it in one clause. Mark's ending repeats it. That is the entire body of evidence. 7, not 7 named ones, not 7 sins, not the 7 deadly sins. That pairing was invented over 1,000 years later. The number 7 in Scripture routinely means completeness. Whatever it was total, and it was ended. And the very next thing Luke tells us is that she was traveling with Jesus and funding the operation out of her own means. Nothing in any gospel connects her to prostitution. That association was attached to her by a sermon of Pope Gregory I in the year 591. The Roman Catholic Church formally separated the identifications again in 1969. The text had never joined them. Now, the rest of the New Testament's vocabulary for the enemy is almost entirely titles, not names. The devil, diabolos, Greek for slanderer, the exact functional equivalent of the Hebrew word accuser. The tempter, the evil one, the father of lies, the accuser of our brothers, who accuses them day and night, the god of this age, the prince of the power of the air, the ruler of this world. Paul warns that Satan disguises himself as an angel of light, which is the least theatrical and most frightening line in the whole subject. Not a monster, not horns, something that arrives looking like guidance. Paul also mentions a messenger of Satan, a thorn in the flesh, sent to harass him, and never tells us what it was. 2,000 years of guessing. The text simply declines to say. There is one more actual name, and it is in Revelation 9, and it is a name for a job. They have as king over them the angel of the bottomless pit. His name in Hebrew is Abaddon, and in Greek he is called Apollyon. Abaddon means destruction. Apollyon means destroyer. So the one-crowned figure in Revelation's underworld is named Ruin in 2 languages. And Abaddon is not even a person in the Old Testament. It is a place, a synonym for the grave, paired with Sheol in the poetry. Revelation takes the name of the pit and gives it to the thing that rules the pit. And then, at the climax, Revelation does something the rest of the Bible never bothers to do. It stacks every identity into one sentence. The great dragon, that ancient serpent who is called the devil and Satan, the deceiver of the whole world. 4 titles, one being, and the verb attached to all of them is thrown down, which leaves Paul's language, the phrase people mean when they say principalities and powers. We do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the cosmic powers over this present darkness, against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly places. That is Ephesians 6, and notice what it does not contain. Not one name, not one rank order, not one biography, just categories of power described by what they do. And Paul had already told the Colossians the outcome. Christ disarmed the rulers and authorities and put them to open shame, triumphing over them. Disarmed, publicly humiliated. The image is a Roman triumph where the defeated are paraded through the streets behind the victor's chariot. That is Paul's demonology in full. They are real, they are organized, they are already beaten, and none of them get a name. So that is the roster. Every named evil being in the Bible, and every one it only describes. Now count the names. Satan, which began as a title. Beelzebub, borrowed from a Philistine god by hostile witnesses. Abaddon and Apollyon, which are the same job in 2 languages. Belial, which is an insult. Legion, which is a head count. Azazel, which nobody can define. Lilith, which appears once and may be a bird. Asmodeus, from a book outside the Hebrew Bible. And that is genuinely it. That is the complete list, across 66 books and roughly 1,000 years of writing. So where did the rest of it come from? The dukes, the seals, the 72, the circles of hell. We can date almost all of it, which is the part I find remarkable. This is not a mystery. It is a bibliography. The 7 princes of hell, each paired with a deadly sin, come from a treatise by a German bishop named Peter Binsfeld, published in 1589. He was a witch hunter, and the pairing was a working tool for interrogations. That is where Belphegor and Mammon as a demon come from. Mammon, in the Gospels, is not a being at all. It is an Aramaic word for wealth. You cannot serve God and money. The catalog of 72 demons with ranks and sigils is the Ars Goetia, part of a grimoire compiled in the middle of the 17th century. Its main source is a list published by Johann Weyer in 1577, which had 69. The grimoire rounded it up. The architecture of hell. 9 descending circles, sins sorted by gravity, a frozen lake at the bottom, is Dante, writing in the early 1300s. It is a magnificent poem. It is a poem. And the story everyone tells about the fall. The throne in the north, the defiant speech, the war in heaven, the palace called Pandemonium. That is John Milton, Paradise Lost, 67. Blank verse, 12 books, and the single most influential piece of demonology in the English language. Better to reign in hell than serve in heaven is not a Bible verse. It is a line Milton wrote for a character. Milton is not the villain of this story. He was writing a poem and everyone knew it. We are the ones who filed it under Scripture. So look at what the Bible does instead, once all of that is cleared away. Look at the shape that is left. There is a courtroom, and there is an accuser in it, and every accusation he files is overruled. There is a wilderness, and things live out at the edge of the settled world, and Israel is told not to go feed them. There are spirits that lie and torment and possess, and every one of them operates inside a boundary set by someone else. And when Jesus meets them, there is no ritual, no incantation, no bargaining, no name required. Every exorcism in the Gospels is over in a sentence or two, and the narrator's interest moves immediately to the person who was freed. The man in his right mind. The girl who is no longer profitable. The woman who now has her own money and spends it on the mission. That is the pattern, and it is completely consistent. The demons are never the subject of the story. They are the obstacle in it. And when the 72 came back excited about their authority over spirits, Jesus gave them the correction this whole subject needs. Do not rejoice in this, that the spirits are subject to you, but rejoice that your names are written in heaven. Do not build the filing cabinet. That is what he is saying. Your names are recorded. Theirs, mostly, are not. The Bible never gives you a complete list of demons, and after walking through all of it, I think that refusal is deliberate. A tradition that names them, ranks them, and draws their seals has begun to find them interesting. And the biblical writers, from Deuteronomy to Revelation, refuse to find them interesting. They find them defeated. The last time Scripture mentions the enemy, he is not on a throne, not commanding legions, and not making speeches. He is thrown down. And the book goes on to describe a city, a river, a tree, and the healing of the nations. The story never was about him. It just took us about 2,000 years of poetry to stop reading it that way. Thank you for watching. If this was useful, subscribe, and tell me in the comments which of these names you had believed was in the Bible.